So we're going to start the meeting. I know I'm in the dark, but if I'm not in the dark, then you can't really see the slides. So I want to welcome everybody to AgriLife Training Center and also welcome to the new year, 2023. Yeah. And thank you in advance to all of you who ahead of time promised not to throw tomatoes at me being the president. Thank you very much. All right, so I wanted to ask if there are new people who've never been to a meeting okay, there's several. Yeah, stand up, you have to stand up, or at least, yes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we have 7 people, 8, 9. Okay, they're coming up everywhere. Very good. Are any of you interns for 2023? Back up, step back up. Interns, yes, some of those, half or so, are interns. Wonderful. And as you know, Carolyn Langlanet is as the training director. She's up here. You probably know her. If you have questions, you can see. Ooh, Carolyn. That's right. Okay, so a few people I would like to highlight, one of whom already has stood up, is Jaden Kelly. If you'll stand up again, he is new he is with the Texas Forest Service, and he's new working out at Jones Forest there, and took Caroline Cruz's place. So, hello, Jaden. Very good. And another, we have our own Diana Foss, our current chapter advisor. She's here a lot, but just so everybody lays eyes on her. And then is Tristan here? Yeah, oh yes. Tristan Bryant is here, also with TPWG, and he's over here and sitting in on our meeting as well. So welcome to you special people. Okay. Tristan is the go-to person for this area for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Yes. All right. So I'm going to try to figure out how to do this, guys. Yes. So I advanced the slide. What? Okay. Woo! Okay. So we have December. Yeah. What's it doing there? But why is it even there?
Why is it even there?
I don't know.
You see if you can do this. There should be a way to do this. And it says,
don't end. Just
which one?
End.
I will not put end. Which one? Is it hide floating meeting controls?
And special announcement, Carolyn Langley is in the house. Yes. I'm so glad about that. Already bailed me out numerous times. Right. December 2022 certification. Carl Poldrak with the class of 2009. No, is that what you said? 2009? That sounds funny. And then Chuck Dingman, the class of 2019. Anybody? They're not here. Okay. Gwen Lanning, the class of 2010. All right. And this. Yes, congratulations. Oh, it's not going. What happened? I'm at the hub. No, ma'am. Okay. Un momento. It's when you got rid of that screen.
There we go.
Okay, so I got to make it live. All right. So more. Lisa Chamberlain, class of 2021. Connie Cortina, class of 2021. Terry MacArthur, class of 2001. Yes, not a mistype. Okay. Initial certification, Laura Romahart, class of 2022. Yes. Double certifications, okay. Yes, very impressive. Okay, came back. Oh, I can do this. Hang on. Well, I got that taskbar up again. Sorry, guys. Oh, Kristen Gerald is in the house. Yes. Okay, there she is. We all see her. here live. She has got her pen. Another double certification, Stephen Hughes, class of 2022. Not here at the moment. Okay, very good. Well, that thing came back, but that's okay. Escape. Ooh, okay. I'm hitting escape just so everybody knows. No. Okay, still there. And the thing won't work. Come on. I did, Carolyn. Yes, I did. Oh, there it goes. More double certifications. Betsy Hensley, class of 2022. Kimberly Lindenfeld, class of 2022. Yeah. Very good, very good. Another one. Ann Menick. Yes. So that was my version of something other than alphabetical order. No problem. Okay. Oops. Oh, this is not good. There we go. Milestones. Milestones. Joanne Bradbury, class of 2022, 250 hours. Yay. Okay, Carolyn, Melissa, is this correct? Jake? More milestones? Okay, Andre Hauser, 1,000 hours. Apologies for not having his picture. Yes, yes, you can email Melissa Schubert, membership director, if for some reason we have missed highlighting you. Jay Rubens, class of 2015, 2,500 hours. What? Yes. No. Oh, yes. Okay. Anybody else, Melissa? Okay. Okay. I think that's got that for now. So I would like to announce that your chapter membership renewal is due now for 2023. If you are an intern, however, that is covered in your intern class fee. You don't pay an extra membership for this year. All right. So if you go to our website, it shows you there how to pay your dues. You can pay them online, or you can mail a check to the PO box. All right. Or you can give Andre Hauser a check tonight and get that just out of your hair. Right. Okay. Very good. Okay. I have an alert. You can read this. I don't need to read it for you. And it's also going to be on our website. Prescribed burning on W.G. Jones State. No. Wait for the recording. I had a blip in the recording. So this is to tell you, just so you're in the know, what's fixing to happen. This does not mean you need to go and, be on the side of the road and watch it happen. Jaden, I should have had you come up here and say that. Yeah, anything you need to add to that announcement, please don't come out and watch. Please don't go there and watch. I mean, because smoke and I don't know what all, but so anyway, just so you know, you might want to avoid the area. Any of you on 1488, avoid the area. All right. Okay, hopefully I'm not skipping anything. Here, we are going to talk about advanced training. Okay, so here is some information on the slide. If you don't know this already, read over it. And Denise Hall, our advanced training person, will come up here and just say a few words.
With the arrow? It's full. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I want to go back. No.
No, you're wrong.
This is good, right?
No, volunteer opportunity. No, that's.
Oh, that looks like mine.
It does look like it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll get it right in a minute. All right. So everyone can read this. What this is about, if you want to take a picture of it with your telephone, if you need, your camera. You just, these bulleted items right here are various ways that you can find advanced training opportunities, okay? There are plenty of them. We have a full plate for the rest of January, and we're really going strong for February, so there's no shortage of advanced training opportunities. The VMS codes to log in your AT hours are going to be located at the bottom of each AT listing, or they should be. If they're not, let me know. And let's see what else. Yeah, there is a form that's located, if you go to the calendar on the Heartwood website, Heartwood chapter website, and click on the tab that says calendar. Was there a comment? If you click on the tab that says calendar, right up at the top of the calendar page, there's a link. And you can just click on that link and go to a form. This is if you find something that you think might be good for advanced training that you want to share with the community, or maybe you just want to take by yourself. You can fill that form out and send it to me. And then I'll go through all the stuff that I have to go through to approve it, okay? So that's a real easy one. And if you have any questions at all, you contact me. There's my email address through the Heartwood chapter. Can my voice carry without? Oh, okay. We're on Zoom. Okay. All right. So, oh, you're welcome. We got it? All right. All right. And so next, I'm just going to point out each chapter meeting, I'll point out something of interest that I think you all might enjoy. And some of you have already been to the Mexican Freetail Bat cave, or it's really not a cave, it's just a building in the Huntsville area. So you can join Tommy Hope for a Piney Woods Wildlife Society presentation on January the 17th, which is coming up. And he is going to, that's going to be at the Dennis Johnson Park. That is, yeah, I was just going to say that's about it.
There's the time that you take by the bar.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't remember.
Okay, hang on. Let me try to.
It's gonna be at night, right? There you go. 6:30 to 7:30 in person at Dennis Johnson Park, Big Sun Lawn, via Zoom. So the Mexican Freetail Bats are obviously in Huntsville, which is not Big Stone Lodge, but he's going to talk to you about it. He's going to tell you all about the Mexican Freetail Bat. So for those of you who are new, who are not familiar with it, I think it'll be great fun. So I wanted to mention it, okay? And that's it for me.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Denise. Okay.
Sorry.
That's where I'm at now.
I know. This is what I needed.
Carolyn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, just an FYI, we're all in the chat here. We
Yeah.
literally can't hear anything when you guys move away. So the last two slides were just silent, just an FYI.
Okay, we're trying to work through that as we speak.
You're
you hear
doing
me?
great.
You can
I
hear
can
me?
hear you okay, but nothing fantastic.
Okay. So,
Can you hear me? Could you hear me in the beginning?
Yeah, right there. Don't move. Like you need to be that close.
Okay.
Okay, I'm
No,
gonna,
don't-
yeah, that's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna
Okay,
mute
gotcha.
myself now. Good luck.
it's not muted, so I don't know why.
Zoom people, online people, do you need to go back up and have someone talk about that slide for you? Or yes, no?
No, I think we read it.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you for your patience. Maybe I'm trying to turn the microphone up on the computer. Maybe that helped. I don't know. I didn't see it going anywhere, but okay. So I'm back. Outreach. Here is just something that came up new, and it's Oh, Saturday, March 4th. That's not like tomorrow. But anyway, this is new, all right? And it's a public outreach thing. If you will look down here, there will be a link to sign up through Sign Up Genius, okay, in the bulletin. So keep an eye out for that. Think about whether you want to do that and watch for a Sign Up Genius. We don't do everything that way, but when it's a volunteer outreach thing that's at a location where we're going to have a booth, we do Sign Up Genius so that we'll know whether that's going to go for us or not. All right. Yeah, hanging. I'm hanging. Okay, moving on. For volunteer opportunities, you will. We have Brenda Reeves here, who is going to step up and say a few words. Stepping up now, Brenda. But you will see that this slide is very close to the advanced training slide because it is very close to the advanced training slide. Hopefully the wording is correct. And so speak loud, speak right here and
Right.
here. Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. And so this is Brenda Reed.
All right. Hi, everyone. I do have a voice that carries, so I apologize if I get too loud. I just wanted to, I'm not good at reading slides and then interpreting, so I'll let y'all read the slide. I just wanted to point out a few things though. On the calendar, there are many, many volunteer opportunities. I don't think we're all taking advantage of actually reading through the calendar and then clicking on that little tiny link up there that says volunteer service report. What is it? It's exact words for, yeah, the volunteer opportunities form. Anyway, if you click on that, you guys, if y'all are out in the field, you're doing something and you're kind of like, I wonder if I can do this as a volunteer activity. I wonder if I can get hours for that. Go onto the calendar, click on that form, fill it out. It'll get emailed to me. I can read through it. I can get back to you guys. I may ask more questions of y'all. Might want to know exactly what that opportunity has, a little bit more in depth and stuff. And then you guys, I can communicate with y'all and we can determine if that is going to be an opportunity that we can go forward with, okay? I've had just 1 or 2 people over the past year since we've created this form actually use the form. It makes it a lot easier on myself and the AT people to have that form. It clarifies everything. It answers a lot of questions for you guys. So please take advantage, use the form, okay?
Okay. You don't have
The propagation station. Okay, here's another volunteer opportunity. It just came across the desk. It just got approved. So it is the propagation station at Jones Forest. It's located right behind the tree nursery. I don't know if you guys, well, I know several of y'all have been out to the tree nursery and seen it. But it's right behind that. It is with NIPSOP. So we are by the office. Yeah. So we are partnering with them on this project. So please come out and see that. On that same note, Jones Forest does have the tree forest out there. So we're still looking for volunteers. We're actually looking for a volunteer lead out there to take over kind of nurturing the trees and continuing that out there at Jones Forest. So if anybody out here would be interested in possibly doing that, just send me an email, reach out somehow, and I'd love to do that with you guys. Yeah, my email, heartwoodvsp, so Gmail, so right there. Anyway, and then there's one other volunteer opportunity that's not listed that I'd like to give a shout out if anybody would like to take the lead, and that's Friends of Texas. We were doing a lot of things out at Friends of Texas, and that's kind of slipped the past 6 months or so, mainly because of my schedule. But if anybody's interested in being the lead out there and helping that opportunity get off the ground again, send me an email, okay?
Explain what that is. Explain what that is. A little
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, what?
I was just gonna ask, I know, the lady sent out an email at one point.
Mhm,
Where you had
Kathy.
to go through like a little training at first.
That's different. That's actually volunteering for Friends of Texas and their animal care. What we do is we go out there and we do ground maintenance. So we're creating a butterfly garden. We're creating a little hummingbird and
Only
little
other plant.
yeah, pollinator plants, that kind of thing and stuff, and just beautification, and just helping support them, in that way, you know, and so we're just searching for people that have skill, that would like to go out and do that. It's a great opportunity. It's for a good cause. Yeah, you get to see baby animals come in, really cute baby animals, so. Okay, all right, I'm good.
Email in the next class because I couldn't make that time that they had. And she said she would email me on the next one, but I haven't heard back. So
Right.
I
Well,
don't-
so the one thing that we do is Slack. If anybody hasn't, do y'all have Slack? Has everybody learned about Slack? Might want to mention.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to highlight that again. I just didn't have the bandwidth to highlight that tonight, but we will highlight Slack on the next meeting. Were you talking about volunteering for Friends of Texas Wildlife directly or with Texas Master Naturalists? When you wanted another email?
Well, it was something that I found out through class.
Yes.
And then when I got an email and then she sent me the dates back.
Okay.
And then
Okay,
it's
so-
something that I couldn't make.
Okay, so what we will do is I will reach out to Kathy Kuder and about when her next training is to work directly with the animals at Friends of Texas Wildlife, okay? And otherwise, if you're interested, not necessarily in that, but in the, checking the pollinator plants out there, that's contact Brenda Reeves about that. That's two separate things. And you can do both of them. Okay. Okay, yes. I'm going to, excuse me, but I'm finding something that I skipped. Yes. Okay. Don't have my verbiage on this. All right. So let's see. Carolyn Langlanay, would you like to come up and guide through this bylaws approval? This is something that the chapter needs to vote on. If you've noticed, it's been in your bulletin for the past several weeks. We've got to make a couple of tweaks to our bylaws. It's nothing major by any means, doesn't change anything. It's really based on some timeframes and wording. And so we have published that, and you could look at that at your leisure for the past a little bit. So now we need to take a vote in person here by hand. And also those of you online, in a moment, you can put only the nays in the chat room. Is that correct? So fill in the gaps for me, Carolyn.
Okay, so this actually started before he was over there going. Okay, so before November, when I was no longer president, we had the newest bylaws issued by the state. The bylaws do not have any substantive change. It really was just kind of a prettying up, assigning numbers to the different ways that it was organized. The only changes that we're able to make is the fact that our officers only serve for 1 year. We had a choice between 1 year and 2 years. 1 year is much easier. And the other thing on the bylaws is the fact that we're a 501c3. Those are the only two things that are possible to change in the bylaws. Now, I was supposed to be on the ball enough to have had a vote for this in December. And as you can tell, it's January, and now we're going to vote.
Well, we can have a meeting.
In December, well, in November. If I'd been on the ball enough, we would have had it in November. But anyway, so what we're going to do is take a show of hands for those who want to say no.
No.
Oh,
No.
Wait, who's second? Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. You can write Ann Blunt. And Andre. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good. All opposed? Awesome. Okay, so online, yes, I'm going to go over to mine and count. I have 20 people online. So what I was going to do is if there were any nays, if you could write it in the chat, I can count and subtract. I am that swift. I can make that happen. So, but I do believe. Now, the next thing that we're going to have to approve is the chapter operating handbook, right? It's the cough, not the CMOP. Good. So, and that'll be next month. So look for that. We'll include a link in the bulletin and the newsletters that are coming out for you to look through those documents. Now, it's, it sounds like it's really boring reading. It's really, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not boring. It's very interesting when you realize how we're supposed to be set up and how we're doing. It's fascinating. So, and it kind of gives you insight into exactly how we're making things happen. So thank you so much. Your time.
Okay. And now I do believe it's time for our program. So I don't know. No, you have to do it from here because you have to, get really close to this thing. Okay. So it's time for our program, and the slide for that is right here. And to introduce our speaker is Darla Oakman Doubling. She is Vice President as well as, yes, Programming Director. Here she is.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening for,
Yeah, don't.
okay, don't do that. It's very sensitive up here. We're coming out tonight for our January chapter meeting. We appreciate your time, and we know that you will look forward to listening to our speaker tonight. Mr. Foss is a 1993 graduate of Texas A&M with a BS in geology and is licensed professional geologist in Texas. He has nearly 30 years of experience working for environmental consulting firms, investigating and remediating soil and groundwater contamination at sites across the United States. He currently works for Aptim Federal Services, performing investigation and remediation at former Longhorn Army ammunition plant, which is now the Cato National Wildlife Refuge near Karnak, Texas, Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, and Hill Air Force Base in Utah. He was born and raised in Friendswood as a son of a mining geologist who taught the Apollo astronauts geology in preparation for the moon landing. He claims that he has approximately 9 or 10 years. Wait, let me try that again. He claims that he was approximately 9 or 10 years old when he finally figured out that not every kid spent their summer vacations learning geology at mining locations across the United States and Canada. His interest in coastal geology and flood mitigation has been developed over the last 50 plus years, living in the Houston area and experiencing all that Mother Nature has to offer. Please welcome Bill Foss.
All right, so now comes the fun part, trying to make this all work. Let's see, go into here. There. Yep, I'm going over there next. Is it up? Is it up on there? Okay, let's see where. Where is the share option? Here. Oh.
No.
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 Okay,
No.
I'll let you handle this.
No. Unless you've got out of it.
I knew I should have taken that career in computer science.
That was my.
We got this. This is easy.
Yeah.
Oh, why is it saying join the meeting? That's what I'm saying.
That's what I said.
You said it first. We're
Because
here.
we're still in there, because it's over there.
Okay, let me do this. Here we go.
There you go.
That's what we needed. We needed new
New
share.
share.
And it's this one?
No,
No,
it's that one.
it's
Okay.
this one. And go look
I
at my
need to
computer.
resume slideshow.
Yeah, we're seeing the PowerPoint.
You seen it correctly, Dave?
No, just the PowerPoint, not presentation mode.
Okay. Okay, and how is that possible?
Yeah, that was.
Okay, that's not it. That's- Okay,
Just go down here, go down. to-
Here we go. oh, I remember what we did. We did
Yeah, you
this.
the display stuff.
I did that, and then I did duplicate. I keep thinking it's a touch screen and it's not. Okay, there we go. Come on, where is my mouse? Where? There it is. Duplicate.
Perfect.
Are we
Now we
just
just gotta hide the toolbar.
there? And then we're gonna hide this toolbar.
There you go. Bingo. We see
Yay.
the full presentation.
Thanks, husband.
All right, can y'all hear me at the back there? Okay, good. Can y'all hear me online?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So I apologize in advance because this is a talk that I've put together that's two different talks that I've tried to make into one that was originally a training course for the Gulf Coast chapter where I talked about how geology affects us here in the Houston area and in the Texas coastal area. But then also the second one was kind of how we affect the geology or how we try to affect the geology and using geology in the expansive definition that includes surface water and hydrology and geomorphology and things like that. So if it's a little bit disjointed, that's why, but hopefully it's entertaining and interesting along the way. So that's okay. Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of Texas history or from a geologic standpoint and understand that there's several billion years of Texas history before this that are somewhat immaterial to what we have as geology today. So we'll start with Cretaceous time about 94 million years ago. And as you can see in the, let's see if I can get the laser pointer going here, right here. So this large blue area right in the middle of all the green is the inland sea, as some people called it, the Sundance Sea, I think, things like that. But it was an inland sea stretching all the way from the Gulf of Mexico up to Canada that covered most of Texas as we know it today. And so this is where we got the Cretaceous age Edwards limestone. That's the Edwards Aquifer in San Antonio and central Texas. The highest point in Texas, out in West Texas, is a piece of carbonate reef that was formed during this time. So a lot of the bedrock that is our near surface bedrock in a lot of Texas was formed during this time. But the other thing I want you to pay attention to as I go through these next two slides is the coastal extent here. As you can see, this water is way up into Texas. The continental shelf is a thing of no consequence whatsoever to the rest of this. But our current coastline and where we are today was deeply underwater during this time. So at this point in time, water is very high. We're looking at deposition in this area. Anytime you have slow water with land surrounding it, you're going to be depositing soil from that's running in the material running off of that land. And then when you get to a situation like this, which is about 14 million years ago, you can see that we have a coastline very similar to today. And there's a continental shelf that's about 100 miles offshore here from Galveston. And but in the Houston area, in the area along the coast as we know it today, we're eroding in this situation because we have water running off of that land, as water is the most significant erosional agent anywhere on the planet, including in the desert. So when you have exposed land and you have rain falling on it, you're going to take some of that land and wash it into the nearby watersheds. And so in this time, we're eroding that material that was laid down as part of the Cretaceous. And then look again, this is the peak of the last ice age, about 18,000 years ago. And the coastline of Texas during that time is off the coast as we see it today. It's out at the edge of the continental shelf. So 100 miles of coastal difference in a few thousand years from where we are today. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So before going through?
Yes.
So what made it go away? And
There's all kinds of cycles. Okay, sorry, for the folks online, the question was what made the water go away and what made it come back? Mainly it's melting and freezing of the polar ice cap. So different cycles in the earth as we pass through different parts of the galaxy, things like that. We get different amounts of cosmic rays. The solar wind affects the planet differently, and it allows in more or less radiation depending on the tilt of the earth and all these. Yeah, right. When you get enough water taken out, then you didn't have enough water to fill it anymore. So, and then if something to think about here is if you look at during this ice age slide, we have glaciers down to the mid-continent here, down over the Great Lakes area, down into the Midwest. And so south of that area, we were having snowfall, not rainfall. We were having heavy snows across the plains across North Texas. And so, excuse me, our rivers and lakes that we have today are a small fraction of what type of runoff they were handling when we had snowmelt events during the seasons from that period of time. So if you think about the Brazos River, the Colorado River, the Trinity, the Sabine, things like that, they were handling snowmelt coming from the snow out in front of these glaciers and handling glacial outflow as much as they were rainfall like we have today. But the quantities involved were much faster. So I'll show you a slide here in a minute talking about how that affected the river basins that we have. But what I want you to think about in all of this, and it'll be the underrunning theme for all of this, is when you have moving water, you're picking up sediment, you're moving it around, and that's what formed the coast as we know it today. So modern time, again, we're back to where we were in the Miocene. We have a coastline similar to that time frame. We have a continental shelf offshore. That continental shelf protects us somewhat from storm surge as it comes in because it keeps the wave action and the surge action from being as deep as it would be if it were coming in directly off the continental shelf. So now I'm going to shift over into, okay, what happens on the smaller scale with all of that water moving around? This is just a generic slide. This isn't meant to represent anywhere in particular, but I think it does a good job representing kind of the central Texas area where we have an elevated highland up in the Edwards Plateau. We have a flat area down in San Antonio area, and then a coastal plain running basically from San Antonio and southward all the way to the coast. And what I want you to take from this slide, and it's what I talk about in my other training class, is that everything here is interrelated. The pollution from this city is going into groundwater, it's going into surface water. The water that falls up here, snow melt, rainfall, anything like that, is going in and resurfacing down here. What we put into the ground, what we put into the water is going to eventually end up in a watershed, and it's eventually going to end up in a lake or a gulf or an ocean somewhere. So when you think about agricultural runoff, you think about urban stormwater runoff, all the pollutants, all the sediment, all the different nutrients that are in that affect the downstream ecology as it comes through. So to go even smaller, this is 3 different depictions of a nameless bayou that could be Buffalo Bayou or anywhere else on the planet. What happens when water is flowing fast? It can pick up larger sediment. It can pick up, if it flows very slow like our bayous here, all it's going to pick up is very fine clay, colloidal particles, mud, if you will. It's why the Galveston water is so brown, because we have such large amount of colloidal particles coming in. When you get to a faster moving stream, you can pick up sand. When you get to a mountain stream, you can roll boulders down the hill. When you get out to the desert and have a flash flood come through, you can roll very large boulders. You can roll cars, you can roll bridges down the stream. So when it's moving fast, it can carry a much larger sediment load. So when we have a normal flowing stream, it's going to carry all the sediment that it can carry at whatever speed it flows here in the channel. As it moves and meanders, it may pick it up and lay it down a few times, but it's all going to stay in the channel. But when we have a flood, that water is moving fast here in the channel. But when it moves up and out of the channel on these banks here on the side, that water starts to slow down. It hits trees, it hits streets, it hits other things that slow that water down. And what happens when the water slows down? It can't carry as much sediment. So it's going to drop off some sediment. And the further out you go, the sand and gravel is going to get left right here. And the further out you go onto that limb and out farther from the channel, the more you're going to be dropping finer and finer particles as that water slows down and finds a place to stop eventually. And so what has happened over the years here before we started developing everything was we created these natural levees along the streams and bayous. If you walk up to any natural bayou around Texas where it floods, you'll see there's kind of a rise as you come up to it, and then you drop down into the main channel. And that's an overbank deposit from flooding that's built up over the years. And it's why the Mississippi River, the Brazos River, anywhere like that has very fertile, usually fine-grained soils, is because you've got all this flooding overbank deposit. So going forward, think about the fact that when we alter this area and we alter this area, we're fundamentally changing how that channel can respond to flooding. So, and this was where I was talking about when you have a erosional situation where you're carrying a lot of water, where you're in a above water situation, you're carrying a lot of water. Oops, sorry. This channel on the left here is the original floodplain. I want you to imagine that as the Brazos River during the outcome or the out years of the last ice age, where we have a very broad floodplain, a main channel, several tributaries, but you can see that overall this floodplain has cut a large swath through the terrain surrounding it. When you get to a situation like we are now, where we don't have as much water coming down the Brazos, and don't tell anybody during the Harvey I said that, but when we have less water than we used to coming down the Brazos, it starts to cut a narrower channel. And so you can see terraces that get cut into the terrain around the streams. And this is important because of how we treat those terraces and how we construct things on them, how we build dams and things like that to try to control water. We have to be careful of where we are in those terraces, where we are on the land around the stream. If you want an example of this, ride the MS-150 from Houston to Austin. If you go out through on 529, before you cross the Brazos River, you drop down 2 drops. So it's the outer terrace and the inner terrace. And then when you get to Burley, you go up a terrace, and when you get towards Belleville, you go up another one. And those are really important because those are the first 2 hills that anybody sees, and you really find out who's trained for the MS-150 when they hit those first 2 hills. It's about, if you start at the longest start, it's about 30 or 40 miles in. That's when you really find out who's been training and who's just faking it. So now what happens when all this sediment that we've picked up in these various channels gets to the shore? Everybody knows, they've heard about the Mississippi Delta, they've heard about Delta formation, but what's really happening here is you have flow coming down a series of channels, and when it hits the coastline, the water slows down and it starts to drop the sediment load. And when it drops that sediment load, over time it plugs up a channel, and so the river finds a different way to get to the Gulf. And it finds a different way. And as you plug each channel up, it flows a little further out on the next one before it hits the Gulf and starts to drop sediment load. And so if you think about this river, it's always flowing, but it's just going to kind of meander back and forth. And over time, think of it as like a big fire hose slowly pumping out mud and somebody just handing it back and forth like this. You're eventually going to build this delta. And that's what's happened all throughout the Gulf Coast. We've got it's not as expansive here as it is on the Mississippi, mainly because it's not as big of a drainage basin that it's flowing from. But we have a delta formation along the Texas coast, the Mississippi coast, the Louisiana coast, for all these different rivers. And how we treat the flow coming down our rivers affects how it's going to continue forming in the future. So that'll be a case study I get to here in just a moment. But I want you to keep this image in mind when I start talking about Louisiana in particular, because what we've done with the Mississippi River is to pick one channel and say, this is the channel. And we put levees, we put barriers, we put all kinds of things because we want to keep it open for shipping. And so we've neglected the flow that would be flowing down all these other channels. We're no longer replenishing this material. And as it's deposited, everything around it is constantly sinking. Everything along the coast is constantly trying to sink into the coast. You'll see some slides that I give here in Houston area about faulting and subsidence. And we have faulting here across Houston, stretching into the west side and the north side of Houston, that are based on the sediments that were deposited here many, many years ago, slowly settling their way into the Gulf. And there's faulting that's created as those differential settling occurs. So if you allow it to continually replenish, that settlement doesn't do anything. It just gets rebuilt up as each time you have a flood. But if you take away that ability to replenish, you eventually lose the other arms of this delta. You lose the marshes, you lose the sediments, you lose the barrier islands. And that'll be an important theme as we go through here. So the other thing to talk about is what happens at the ends of those channels. So when you get a river coming out and you have a main channel, or you have a main couple of channels or a couple of rivers like we do with the San Jacinto and Buffalo Bayou and Trinity River all coming into Galveston Bay, is you eventually drop out a large load of sand and coarser grained sediments here and create a bar. And over time, if you get enough flow continuing through that same area, you get a bar, then you get a barrier island, and then you get an island like we have in Galveston Island, like we have in Mustang Island and Matagorda Island, things like that. And these islands, I want you to understand, they are dynamic structures. They're not a fixed island that was put there and it's meant to stay there. As the river flow changes, as the currents in the bay change, as anything changes, that island's going to move in response to that. And so when Houston and Galveston were first settled, Galveston was a gigantic, important port right up until about 1900, when they had the 1900 hurricane hit. And the Allen brothers pitched a different idea of, hey, let's get behind this barrier island. Let's go up in here where we have this protected area, and let's settle in Houston instead and make it the big port. Galveston will just be there to protect us. And so we kind of anchored that island in place with a seawall, and we did a lot of things down there to try to basically say, okay, this island's going to stay here. We've sold property behind the dunes and things like that. And said, okay, this is where the island will be. And over the next 100 years, the island has tried to move anywhere it's not anchored by the seawall. And there's a lot of people whose houses ended up in the ocean who say, well, I still own that land. And, what are you going to do for me? So the key here is that these islands are dynamic, and anything we do to try to stop that, we're fighting against that nature, that we're fighting against Mother Nature. So I didn't ask at the beginning, but does anybody here work for the Corps of Engineers? Okay, good. I do work for them. A lot of my work is for them. So they have a lot of limitations that I'll talk about here, but one of those things is their projects are by nature limited to their budget and limited to their project design area. And so as we go through these next sets of case studies, you'll see that sometimes there's some unintended consequences for that. So this is where the talk in the past just talked about how does geology affect us here in the Houston area? What does geology do for us? What does it do to us? So the positive, we have oil and gas production because we have the Luan salt and all the salt dome formations that have created traps for oil and gas. We have great soil for agriculture. We got all these rivers coming together here in the Houston area, all the ones that bring us the floodwaters too. But they leave behind great soil for agriculture. And we have barrier islands protecting our ports. What's the negative? Well, we have subsidence and faulting. I'll talk about subsidence and faulting here in a moment. I'm not going to talk about this next one, the shrink swell soils, other than to say because of the geology here, there's two kinds of foundations under your house in Houston. There's one that's cracked and there's one that's going to crack. So because of the types of clay we have here, because of the types that have been deposited, when they get wet, they swell up. When they dry out, when we have a drought, they shrink. And so you see a lot of houses now having water moisture systems being installed when the slab is installed to try to maintain a stable moisture there. That's to try to prevent the shrink swell soils from cracking the slab. And then both a positive and the negative, because we have the Gulf so close, we have humidity, which is a negative to some, but it also buffers our temperature. So it's a positive in my mind. I don't like being cold, but it also brings hurricane and flooding at times. So it's a double-edged sword, but it's the proximity of that deep well of relatively warm water that buffers us against the winters that they have in Amarillo and El Paso and elsewhere, where they don't have that same humidity and moisture because they're not close to the water. So case study one, let's just talk about ground subsidence and faulting. So this is Goose Creek oil field over by Baytown from around 1900, 1905, something like that. And as you can see, there's oil derricks everywhere. There was no such thing as, you know, leasing and fracking. If you wanted oil, you put your own well in on somebody's land that would let you do it. And if you could put more wells in, you got more oil. So the production of oil from this area, the production of water as part of the oil production in this area was tremendous. They took a lot of oil, a lot of water out of the ground, and it lasted for a very long time. This is from the 1970s, same general area. This is what I used to see driving to my grandmother's house in Beaumont with my parents when I was a kid every other weekend. And I remember Dad talking about how you could almost walk from one platform to the next out across the bay there, right where you came out of the old Baytown Tunnel, which is now Fred Hartman Bridge. But so for 70 years, there was oil production from this area, and there was groundwater extraction. And the end result of that is subsidence. So this is a map of subsidence. This is the Goose Creek area right over here. And that's about 10 to 12 feet of subsidence in less than 100 years. Actually, just over, yeah, like 94 years. So, and it's had a little bit more since then, but that's the reason why the Brownwood subdivision outside Baytown is now the Goose Creek Nature Center, because that area sunk so far that they couldn't stop it from flooding. And if you look at Kemah down here, let's see, where is it? Right in here, they've had about 5 to 6 feet of subsidence over that time. How do you think they would have done during Ike? Had they had another 6 feet of elevation, would have helped them an awful lot. If you look in here in central Houston, down around downtown, where the original water wells were for the city before they created Lake Houston, and down along the ship channel where they were producing water, groundwater for plant processes, and the same down in Texas City where they were pulling oil and gas and plant water, they've all got 7 to 10 feet of subsidence. So a lot of the flooding issues that these areas have, a lot of the hurricane susceptibility, particularly down here in Texas City and along the ship channel, is due to the fact that we've had subsidence over all this time. And so we now have the Houston Galveston Coastal Subsidence District that's controlling groundwater pumping. They've put us all the way out here to West Houston. They've put us onto surface water to try to minimize the amount of groundwater that's being used, minimize the amount of subsidence. But this whole area is still going to subside to some degree. But hopefully what they've been able to do will cause that to be less. And so I mentioned faulting in the same breath. This is a map from early 1970s. Gentleman by the name of Yule Clanton, who was working with my father, training the astronauts. And when they got done with the Apollo program, they were kind of looking around for other things to do. My dad went off and became a mining geologist, and Yule started looking at Landsat images from the newly launched satellites and different observation platforms they had. And what he figured out was he could see where there were faults. Oh, sorry. And this is Ellington, this is Hobby over here. I-45 kind of runs up through the middle here. And these are oil fields that are around a salt dome that's in this area. And so what these faults represent is where that salt dome was rising up, and there's faulting on all the different flanks of the salt dome. And you can tell that because these faults on the north side are down thrown towards downtown. The side towards downtown is lower than the side down here. So if it were subsidence faulting, like I was talking about from general settlement of soils, it would all be down thrown towards the coast. So these are all related to this salt dome here. And what Yule said was, hey, this is great. I could see these faults. You know, these could really tear up some infrastructure. They could hurt somebody if they built a house on top of one of these. They're not tectonic faults. They're not going to create earthquakes, but they may move a few inches every 10 years. They may move a foot every 15, 20 years, depending on the fault. And if that's underneath somebody's slab, obviously their house is going to be badly screwed up by it. Well, it's the subsidence that causes the fault. It's differential settling. So one side moving down or up more than the area next to it, and it creates a fault down the middle. So you have a displacement between the two areas. So you can see it on the west side of Houston. I'll show you on the map here in a minute. If you're driving out I-10, there's a little dip called the Long Point Fault if you're coming from I-10 towards Houston, or it's a little rise. And if you go down Willcrest, they used to see it right south of Berry Knoll. There was a dip of about 4 feet, and they've just in the last couple of years smoothed it out with when they repaved the road. But you can look back through the neighborhoods and see there's houses built all along this. So what Yule did was he said, hey, this is great information for the residents. I'm going to go to the city leaders. He went to developers. He went to the Board of Commerce and all, or Chamber of Commerce, said, hey, I can show you where these are. You guys can avoid building houses on these. And they all looked at him and said, wow, Yule, that's really information. What we'd like you to do is shut up. Shut up. Stop talking about this. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to know about it. We don't want people thinking that Houston's not a great place to live. Just please be quiet. And he said, but no, really. And they went to Deke Slayton at NASA, and Deke came to Yule and said, you'll find something else to do. Some of these guys control our budget. So this was dropped for about 25 years. And in 2006, Harris County's Flood Control District's GIS group won a competition in a national GIS map competition. And if you look at the blurb down here at the bottom, the purpose is to make sure that the population of Harris County is aware of the geologic fault formations, active fault lines, enable potential homeowners and developers to determine the presence of faults in a general area, and subsequently determine suitable places for their infrastructure. Great, right? First thing they did after they won that competition is put this big notice right over the top of the map before you can open it. This is not our data. Don't call us about this data. Don't call to ask us about the faults under your house. Don't call to ask us if you can sue your developer. Call the USDA because we don't want to hear it. And this map is no longer available online anywhere that I can find it. So, but here's what it looked like. And this was the area Yule was showing on his map that I posted up. This is the Long Point Fault that I was talking about on the west side of town. But you can see these faults. These are the ones that are related to overall subsidence of the land towards Galveston Bay, towards the coast. And then these down here along closer to the coast, like in here and in here, are salt dome related faults near where petroleum used to be produced. But as you can see, this is still not a popular topic. And iteration 3 is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Shubab Khan at U of H, who's now using LiDAR, 3rd generation data. And he's able to show these maps in great detail. This is that Long Point Fault I was talking about. And you can see this area here is higher than this area down here. And there's a very distinct stripe. And these are neighborhoods. These are houses. That's what it looks like where this fault is going through. There's houses, there's streets, there's drainage basins, all kinds of things like that. And so this is how the geology has affected us, if you will, how we have built over the top of the geology while ignoring it. And unfortunately, the people that live in these houses along here deal with it probably every couple of years, having to go and patch cracks in their houses, having to get their foundations fixed, things like that. So if you ignore the geology doesn't ignore you, unfortunately. So case study 2, talk a little bit about barrier islands and what happens when you degrade those islands. This is North Padre Island, the Padre Island National Seashore. And if you look back here off the coast, this is a point where the water's really high. They got a lot of sargasso weed in there. But this dune system that stretches the 60 some odd miles of Padre Island is very healthy, probably the healthiest we have in the state because there's a complete lack of development for that entire 67-mile stretch or whatever it is. And those dunes range from about 15 to 25 feet high in the first layer. And there's a few places where we made cuts through them at some point in the past for people trying to ranch out there, or people trying to do oil and gas exploration. But by and large, these dunes are intact for the entire length of the island. And it's not just one dune. If you go and stand up on top of one of the dunes, you can see this is that first line I was talking about. There's another line back here. And then you go all the way off into the distance and you continue to see striations of dunes. And what these dunes do is, first of all, act as a barrier to storm surge, as a barrier to wave action. The vegetation anchors them in place against wind movement and against some water movement. But once the water breaches that first barrier, these dunes back here continue to slow it down. They continue to make sure that water isn't one straight, continuous moving force crossing the island, tearing the island apart, as it will. The faster that water can move through, the more sediment it's going to pick up. So by having multiple dune structures, vegetation in place, you slow that water down, and the slower water can't take as much sediment with it. And now this is West Galveston Island, probably 15, 20 years ago. As you can see, we've put structures right up onto the edge. You get farther down towards Jamaica Beach. In that area, we've got house slabs out here in the water. This may be actually a remnant slab from a building or something out here that's anchored that. But this is the end of the seawall, is basically right underneath us here. And as you go down, you can see they've made some effort here to put a small dune in here. This is maybe 4 or 5 feet high. I remember when I was a kid, we used to take Christmas trees out, and they would come around and pick them all up and bring the Christmas trees down here and dump them on the beach to try to anchor the sand in place and give something for vegetation to hold on to. But the problem is we've taken away everything behind it. We've got one dune line that we're trying to maintain so that we can have a beach, so that we can have these large structures behind the beach. But once the water breaches that one dune, it's got all the way to go. It doesn't have anything to slow it down other than a building. And from Ike on the Bolivar side, this is what happens when you have a big storm come through and you don't have a dune structure in place to slow it down. This is the original beach line out here. The dunes would have been here had we not built houses up onto them. And we've wiped the slate clean, taken the entire island off. So unfortunately, we've built onto these barrier islands that are meant to be not static. They're meant to be dynamic. We decided we were going to try to keep the islands in place, even if the dunes went away, and kept allowing people to build those houses again and again. And the end result is you have an unsustainable system that's not going to survive a storm like Ike or a storm even worse. So now we started talking about a project, right? The Ike Dike project. Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but I'll talk about some of the components of it as we go through here. One of the things they're looking at doing is building a dune structure of 12 and 14-foot dunes all the way down this Bolivar Peninsula and all the way from the end of the seawall down to the west end. They're going to put a surge gate, or they want to put a surge gate across Galveston Bay Inlet that will close when there's storm surge coming. And then they want to put a flood wall, the height of the seawall plus 4 feet, all the way around Galveston, including gates on Offits Bayou as well. And so this is a monumental undertaking. I mean, when we went to build the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal over in New Orleans, I think that was about a $1.5 billion project, biggest project the Corps had ever done. And I think the budget I've heard on this one, the latest estimate is something like 26 billion. So this is a huge undertaking. My thought is it needs to be very carefully considered of whether we want to spend that amount of money for what we're going to gain or what we may lose. So this is what the dune structure is going to look like. They're building a 12-foot dune out at the front of the beach, and then a 14-foot vegetated dune behind it. They're trying to build a double wall, which is somewhat smart. But they acknowledge up front that this dune here is sacrificial. It's good. It's not going to survive. It's not going to be long lasting. and it's going to be probably replenished about every 6 to 8 years. And when you talk about the length of that dune that we're talking about, you're talking about millions of cubic yards of sand. So number one, when we put millions of cubic yards of sand onto this beach the first time, and it gets washed out by a storm or depleted, where is that sand going to go? What is it going to do to our system? What is it going to do to our ecosystem? I think that's an important question that I don't think has been adequately discussed. And you'll see when you talk about what they've done to justify how they build this, they'll talk about modeling for a design storm in a project area. And that's where I talk about the Corps of Engineers has a budget. They have a number in mind. They have an area to protect in mind. And computing power is what it is. You can't do an unlimited model. So you've got to pick an area and say, okay, my model is going to show this area. I'm looking for what happens in this area on the model. And I don't know, number one, I don't know when you stop all this water from coming into the dune system we have now, where's that water going to go? It's not going to just stop. It's going to move somewhere. So will we need a gate down at San Luis Pass? What happens on the other side of San Luis Pass where we're not building a dam for Surfside and Freeport and all that area? Is that area now going to get all the water that would have come ashore or over Galveston, west into Galveston Island down there? What's going to happen at Bolivar? Are we going to, reopen Rollover Pass with the storm surge? There's a lot of things that could happen here. But then the second thing is, you remember what I talked about with the hydrologic cycle? With all that sediment, all the contaminants, all the material coming down to the coast, when we go to find another several million cubic yards of sand to replenish this, it's probably going to be dredged sand from somewhere offshore, somewhere in the ship channel, something like that. What's in that sand? Do we have contaminants? Do we have pollutants? Are we disturbing valuable habitat? Are we disturbing valuable ecological areas when we pull that sand and try to put it back up here? Are we disturbing areas when the sand gets washed back out? So I don't feel personally that that's been adequately discussed. The Corps of Engineers is very focused on the structures to build, understandably, because that's their role. But in terms of where is the sand going to come from, where is it going to go, I don't think those things have really been looked at or studied very well at all. And I think if we're talking about repopulating this dune every 6 to 8 years, that's a lot of sand to move. It's a lot of sand to get rid of if it's coming off. And I think it's going to fundamentally change a lot of the areas around there. So is what's behind that dune system worth $26 billion? Or should we buy those houses out or let people have those houses but not insure them? What's the I don't know the solution, but this is a situation where we're trying to overcome the geology. This island wants to move. We've taken down the natural protective structures. We're trying to build them back up, but we're not doing it in a way that's necessarily replacing the way they would be. So there's a lot of questions to ask. I don't have all the answers, but I think we ought to be asking those before we commit the amount of money that we want to spend. So case study number 3. I just called this challenges in channelization, but it's a much broader scope, but for lack of a better term, that's what I put up there. So the Mississippi River levee development. So around the 1700s, the first levees were built around New Orleans, but usually farmers using wheelbarrows, oxen, things like that, or mules and whatever. And they were required to build their own levee. They were not all, you were not allowed to develop adjacent to the river until you had built your levee. And so these levees started in the 1700s. They were forced by state law to protect their own land. In 1879, we created something called the Mississippi River Commission, mainly to protect the entrances to the Mississippi River from the Gulf so that we could protect shipping coming up and down the Mississippi River. They had a policy as they started advancing their efforts northward from New Orleans to create what they called a self-cleansing river system, basically a scour channel. If you confine the water more, it would flow faster, which would scour the sediment off the bottom of the channel and keep it from building up, right? It worked to a degree, but it had some penalties. But as they kept having floods further north of their levees and further north of their levees and further north, they kept moving their control until now the Mississippi River commissioned by 1913 controlled all the way to Rock Island, Illinois. So it went from protecting the ports along the coast to controlling most of the major riverway all the way to Illinois. And this is what kind of the typical evolution of a Mississippi River levee looked like. So 1888, 1914, 1928, 1942 to 72, since 1973. And then what they don't show is around New Orleans, we built sheet piles into the top and built a flood wall up on top of that, similar to what they want to build for the Ike flood wall. And understand that each time they had a major flood along the Mississippi River back in the 1800s, the governor and the president, if he was nearby, would show up by horseback carriage or sit on the back of a train and tell everybody, this was a terrible, unforeseeable natural disaster. We're never going to let this happen to you again. And 20 years later, they'd build the levees up a bit. 20 years later, they'd have another flood come through from a different angle, went around the end of the levee or something. And the politicians would show up again, maybe this time on the back of a bus, and they'd stand on the stump and tell everybody, this was terrible, unforeseeable natural disaster. We're never going to let it happen again. And we've gotten all the way to Katrina in 2005, and we've had all the politicians standing on the levees around New Orleans telling us this was a terrible, unforeseeable natural disaster. We're never going to, it's entirely foreseeable by now, okay? Everybody who's looking can see that this is a foreseeable disaster. And all we're doing by building levees is moving where that water goes. We're moving where the water goes. We're moving where the sediment that the water is carrying goes. So what happened along the Mississippi River, particularly down in the Delta, as I said earlier, is that as you take away that overbank deposits, as you take away those flood deposits by channelizing that river, that land is still settling. And so you keep having to pile more levee up because the land is settling, you're not replenishing it. And so we've gotten to the point now where most of New Orleans is underwater. It's under sea level, and we built these levees up 40 feet high or something to protect it. And obviously, yeah, it's a great project for the Corps of Engineers. They've built, there's a lot of contractors like my company that have made a lot of money. We built the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal, so I can't, throw too many arrows, but the reality is we've fundamentally altered the system that was keeping that land in stability. And so since we've taken away that stability, it's our job and our responsibility, if we're going to keep allowing people to build things there, to maintain that stability or find a different way. So this is the slide I was talking about earlier with the natural outcome of picking a channel. This is the main modern delta here. This is an old abandoned delta. This is a delta over here that's been abandoned from previous flow of the Mississippi River. We've picked this one channel and said, this shall be the channel. And so now, instead of all that sediment depositing out here, depositing out here, depositing over here, depositing out here where you see this old sandbar from previous flow, instead we're taking all that sediment, channeling it all the way down with that south scouring river channel, flowing it as fast as we can to keep it moving, and we pump it all out into the Gulf of Mexico down here. And what is all that sediment and river flow carrying with it? Carrying all the nitrogen that's put onto fields out in the Midwest. It's carrying all the cattle feces that are being washed off the fields. It's carrying all the different urban pollution, urban nutrients that, phosphorus and things like that are being washed into the watersheds and flowing down the river. And now we've taken all that nutrient that should have been being nutrients for these marsh plants. And instead those nutrients are a dozen miles offshore or 50 miles offshore. And we now have something called the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, because all those nutrients go out there. The bacteria that are in the water say, hey, great nutrients. And they grow and they take all the dissolved oxygen that's in the water around there and use all that oxygen to create algal blooms. And now there's no dissolved oxygen left and nothing else can live there. And so even though it's not on land, even though it's not part of New Orleans, that's a legacy of this entire policy of trying to channelize the stream, is that we've created that dead zone offshore because we're taking all those nutrients that would have been deposited in the marshes and growing those marshes, and we've taken all the contaminants that would have been filtered out by those marshes, and we've put them out into the Gulf. And in the meantime, these marshes are still settling. And so Louisiana is losing their barrier islands, they're losing their marshes, so they don't have the protection they used to have for storm surge coming in. So it's a huge problem, and the only way to fix it is to make a fundamental change in how we handle the river. And I think that's frankly beyond us, at least for the foreseeable future politically. But we have infrastructure we've built back here that is, plants and things like that, petrochemical plants, and we have a huge city and entertainment venues and things like that, you're talking billions and billions of dollars to buy those out and move them somewhere else. So, yeah.
Do you think the river will go straight down?
I don't think it'll go there. There's a structure north of here called, I forget what it's called, the Mississippi River Control Structure, I think, the MRCS, I think. And what it does, the Mississippi River, if we hadn't channelized it and put levees on it, would have long ago flowed down the Atchafalaya River. The Mississippi wants to go flow down the Atchafalaya River because what we've been doing over time with that self-scouring system is building the bottom of the river up. The whole river has been, as we built levees and continue to build the structures, the river is actually rising, the land around it sinking, and the water really wants to flow over to the Atchafalaya River. And so John McPhee has a great book called Control of Nature, where he has a whole big long section about that structure. And his comment towards the end of it is, I'm betting on the river. And frankly, I agree with him. I think that eventually we're going to lose the river somewhere in the vicinity of that structure, probably during a huge flood event. And if you remember, I'll show you some pictures in a minute, but if you remember the scenes from Katrina of them dropping sandbags into the levee, this is going to make that look like Tonka toys when the river decides during a big flood event to go down the Atchafalaya Channel. And right now they're allowing a certain amount of flow through that structure to go over to the Atchafalaya to relieve the pressure. But what that does is it exaggerates the problem further downstream by reducing the flow that would be carrying that sediment further on. So in answer to your question, yes, I'm betting on the river. I don't know if it'll be at that structure, if it'll be nearby, but I'm betting on the river long term. Yes. Yeah, those were natural deltas. That was, remember when I talked about that? Remember I talked about that fire hose? Those were, maybe 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, something like that. The river was flowing out there, and eventually that delta built itself up enough that it was easier for it to flow a different direction and create a different delta over here. And as it goes over time, it should be moving back and forth. But for the last 200 years or so, we've decided that it's going to flow down this channel. Yeah, it's absolutely, we're self-destructing this area here by neglect. It should be being replenished, and it's not. Louisiana is trying to do some things to bolster their coastal marshes, and they are trying to do some things to protect these barrier islands. How successful they'll be long term, I don't know. Our company's been involved in some of those projects. But, oh yeah, I mean, a lot of Louisiana took a lot of their BP Deepwater Horizon money and put it towards doing some of their coastal protection and marsh replenishment, things like that. So they've been very smart with a lot of that money, at least in terms of trying to save what they have and hopefully rebuild some. But like I said, how successful it will be long-term, I don't know. I'm not involved in those projects, so I don't know the projections on them. So let's bring it a little closer to home. We have our own channelization project that's currently on the books or in study. And remember I talked about the Allen brothers picked downtown and Allen's Landing in particular to be the new center of commerce for Houston, or for the Houston area instead of Galveston. And so this is the ship channel coming up here. And then we have Buffalo Bayou coming out to Barker Reservoir and Addicks Reservoir, and then White Oak Bayou coming up here. All of this is draining to downtown. Early in the past century, I think the 1930s, if I recall correctly, they built Barker Reservoir and Addicks Reservoir, and the express purpose of those reservoirs was to take the water that was coming from all the coastal prairie out here, the Katy Prairie, and slow it down and hold it so that it wouldn't come down here and hammer downtown and destroy all the stuff built along the bayou. And we, in the meantime, built this whole area out with really, really nice homes. And we built all the area behind the reservoir up with some nice homes, and out here with some nice homes. And the Corps of Engineers along the way had their project storm. They had their project study area. And that project storm was not one that would fill it to the top of the berm. It was one that filled it most of the way up, based on whatever their parameters were that they used. And so they didn't buy all that property behind the dams. They bought only enough to cover what was going to be inundated by the project storm within the study area. And as everybody knows, during Harvey, we flooded those areas. We went to the very top of those levees on both of those reservoirs. And when they finally decided, okay, we've got to release water because we're going to lose the dam, because the water is going to start flowing around and over it so fast that it's going to lose the dam. When they did that, then they flooded all these really nice homes. And so everybody upstream that lived on land not owned by the Corps of Engineers is mad at the Corps of Engineers and is suing them, rightfully so, as a taking because they flooded their property with a control structure. Everybody downstream is saying, hey, we were doing fine in this flood right up until the point where you opened your floodgates and flooded our houses, so you owe us money too. So the Corps is looking at this, and the initial steps of the Buffalo Bayou study that I'm going to talk about came from their dam safety group, in that it's protecting their dam. Their goal and their focus at the beginning of this was to protect the dam, not to protect downtown, not necessarily to protect these houses. It's, we want to protect the operation of the dam, and we don't want to have to buy a property behind the dam, and we don't want to have to buy a property downstream of the dam. So what do we have to do to be able to operate our dam in a way that allows us to do that? So a little background on this. You look at downtown, this is Buffalo Bayou Park coming in here. Can y'all still hear me online? Buffalo Bayou Park coming in, and Buffalo Bayou coming in and around the north side of downtown through the theater district and up to here. White Oak Bayou comes in from the top here down along I-45 and then crosses under right south of, or right east of the theater district and joins Buffalo Bayou. And I want to go through a couple of slides from Hurricane Harvey to show you what that area looked like. This was White Oak Bayou during that time. So you can see it's at the very top of its levee, aimed right at downtown. All that water, all that sediment moving right at downtown. This is looking west from downtown out through Buffalo Bayou Park. This is Waugh Bridge here, I believe. Or actually, this is Waugh over here. And all of this area is flooded. All of this water is headed for downtown. And this is what the area that water has to flow through, where it meets White Oak. Looks like there's a lot of room for that water to spread out and go other places, right? These buildings are way more expensive than a house, right? So this one here, this one here. So we've got all this water channeled from these bayous going right to downtown. And this is when you have that water all running up there and it gets backed up because it can't all flow through downtown. It flows into the parking garages, flows into the streets, but it still can't all get through downtown. What does it do? It slows down, drops its sediment load. This is what Buffalo Bayou Park looked like after Hurricane Harvey. And so this is the Corps of Engineers Channel Improvement Study Area. Goes all the way from Barker Dam, all the way from Addicks Dam, down through the west side of Houston, all the way down here, and it stops right there, right before it gets to downtown. My understanding is there's a separate FEMA-based study or FEMA group that is working on the area around downtown and looking at tunnels and things like that. But Buffalo Bayou the Corps of Engineers, their design parameter was, we want to be able to flow water as fast as possible through this channel so that we can drain these reservoirs, so that we don't flood the houses behind them, we don't flood the houses along the channel below them. So what do they want to do? Straight channel, 200 and something feet wide, concrete blocks, bike path, everybody feel good about that? But we have no trees, no meandering in the bayou, no room for alligator snapping turtles, no room for sediment to deposit along cut banks. We're taking an entire fire hose out of these two reservoirs, we're aiming them right at downtown, and we're stopping the study area right before we get to downtown. So where's all that sediment going to go? If we channel it through Houston with a FEMA project or something to make tunnels or whatever to go around downtown, all that sediment's still going to go. It's still going to be there, and it's going to wind up in the ship channel. It's going to wind up in the turning basin. It's going to wind up at Brady's Landing or down at Lyondell Sitco. We're going to completely sediment in the ship channel and have to come and start dredging that. And when you start dredging the ship channel, you're talking about even more contaminated soil than you would think of further down. Yes, Chair.
Considering what happened in the 60s and 70s, this was the model.
Yeah.
In the 60s and 70s, supposedly flood control learned from the lesson. Is the other group just deciding
This
this didn't work in the 60s and 70s, and they're changing them?
Yeah, everywhere else they're going away from this. My understanding from, and I haven't heard anything on the latest, but my understanding was that they were very active prior to coming up with this plan, consulting with Parks and Wildlife, consulting with other groups and around the city about what the needs were, what the city wanted essentially. And most of that input seemed to get ignored, and the engineers of opinion of we got to flow this water through as fast as possible is where this design came from. And so they've since said, okay, this is not going to be the design yet. They're in the process of reconsidering it. If you want to, they are still very welcoming to outside input about what they want. But for me, the most important part of this is that Terry Hershey and a lot of people put a huge amount of effort into protecting that watershed and making it remain as natural and as untrammeled as possible, or untrampled as possible, all the way from, basically Buffalo Bayou Park West. And there's a huge number of houses along there as well. But again, we're deciding to take a system that's dynamic and we're going to try to make it static. And we're not looking outside of our project area for the downsides of it. So it's a problem, but I don't know that we're going to get a great solution without a lot of activism and a lot of effort on the part of the people of Houston. So last case study, and then I'll let you go. This one goes into what happened in Katrina, and then also talking about that flood wall they want to build around Galveston. So this is Katrina or New Orleans after Katrina. This is a map of the water depths in the areas that flooded. So when you get up here close to Lake Pontchartrain, they have a series of canals running all through here. There's the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal, there's 17th Street Canal, there's London Avenue Canal, Industrial Canal, all these different canals coming through the city. They had levee breaks all over the place. So one of the ones I'm going to look at is one that was not a function of the storm being a monumental storm. It was not a function of the storm simply overwhelming what was built. It was a very simple geologic mistake that caused one of these levee breaks and caused one of the major ones that got a lot of news. So I've mentioned it before, but this is what's called the 17th Street Canal break. And what a lot of people don't realize is, yeah, there's all this water flowing through. These are the flood walls on top of the levee that were built. And what people don't realize is that this flood wall didn't topple. It wasn't a storm so great that it knocked that flood wall down. It undermined it through the geology under the levee and the entire levee slid back about 47 feet because of a simple mistake in the geology. When you look at it from above, you can see the flood wall is still standing upright right here. This is the levee section. It moved 49 feet back from the straight line of the levee. It didn't fall over, and in some cases, it's actually still pitched towards the river because it was undermined from below because of the geologic mistake. And this is a real simple cross section that anybody can read, right? Sorry. But no, what somebody went and made, they went along the top when they decided they were going to put these eye walls up on top of the levees. They went along and drilled borings all the way down through all of these levees and looking for weak marsh, organic type material fill, anything that would not support the levee, that would not keep water from flowing through onto the levee, because they knew when they raised the water level up onto these eye walls, it was going to put additional water pressure onto all this stuff under the levee. And so they were looking for this weak area here that was all old marsh mud, very soft, very pliable, water can flow through it easily, a lot of organic material. And they wanted to put these sheet pilings down into this clay, this gray clay with silt and sand lenses. And the symbol for that clay is CH. It's basically a fat clay that has structural properties. When they were doing boring logs for each of these borings, somebody wrote on this boring log for B64 that there was a gray clay, CH, mixed with marsh. But the symbol next to the writing in the log was CH. And so when somebody at the Corps of Engineers went through, or a contractor most likely, probably somebody like me, went through and made these drawings of how deep all these sheet pilings had to go, they drew for each boring, how many feet down do we have to go to hit CH? Ignoring the fact that in this particular boring, it was mixed and there was still marsh here. And so what happened when the water came up onto this eye wall is it pushed water through this intermixing zone under the sheet pile and into this weak strata. And it acted like a conveyor belt, and the entire levee slid back on that conveyor belt 49 feet with the water pressure pushing it. So one simple mistake from a boring log flooded untold homes. And so keep that in mind when we talk about the Ike Dike flood wall, the ring dike they want to build all the way around Galveston. They want to raise the seawall by 4 feet, and then they want to build a wall all the way around. They want to build very similar I-beams sticking up, T-beams supported underground, and have gates and things like that along the roads that they can close. And then they're going to put pumps behind them for any water that makes it in to try to pump it out. In New Orleans, a lot of those pumps failed. They were not maintained. They were not, the money that was supposed to go towards improving and maintaining them didn't get spent that way. The levees weren't improved in ways they should have been. But just think about, all it takes is one mistake somewhere in this wall, geologically or engineering or otherwise. And you've got this entire area here in blue is 6 feet above sea level. So if you have a 15-foot storm surge, you're going to flood this entire area, and you're going to have spent all that money building this. Yeah, it'll be a giant tub, and if your pumps fail and don't pump as fast as you need them to, they'll all be, those pumps, the wall, the drainage structures are all going to be the subject of a design study. They're all going to have a project area. They're all going to have a design storm. And the contract, I'll tell you right now, as a government contractor, they'll be bid on a low price, technically acceptable contract, which means the first person who puts in a technically acceptable bid, whoever has the lowest price wins it. So if you meet all of their criteria for the design storm and the design project area, and you have the lowest price, you'll get it, even if you're not the best, even if you don't have, one company may throw in some pumps that are capable of twice as much. They won't win it if they're not the cheapest bidder. So that's part of government contracting. It's part of the life I live and I hate, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to leave you with a quote from Mark Twain about the Mississippi River Commission. His opinion was the same as mine and the same as John McPhee's, that you can make as many commissions as you want. You can try to make the river go where you want, but you can't do it. And I'm betting on the river, and I really think before we try to spend the amount of money they're talking about with the Ike Dike, we should very carefully consider what the potential costs are beyond the design storm and outside of the design area. So anyway, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If we build the ice dike and do all that stuff, and we have that creek that is coming in, floods all of Galveston, that area down there,
Yeah.
can we count on the politicians coming in there and say, oh, what a great disaster?
It'll be an unforeseeable natural disaster. And frankly, one of the parts about that really worries me is right now in Galveston, everybody down there knows they'll flood in a big storm. They've had Ike, they've had Harvey, they've had enough. They know they're going to flood. They know they're going to be hit hard. So they've been scared straight, if you will, for the most part, to buy insurance, to be ready for it. What happens when we put a 14-foot wall around everything down there? Everybody, oh, I don't need to have that anymore, right? I'm safe. I don't need to evacuate. I'm protected by the flood wall. So you have a lot of mental aspects that go into when you give people a sense of protection that change how they'll behave. And so I think that's a dangerous thing as well to be considered with that. Yes, ma'am.
We have a friend who was in Japan, and they were building the nuclear power plant, the big wall around it to stop the tsunami.
Yep.
And he was saying that actually the engineers knew the wall wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
But in Japan, saving face is more important than being right.
Yeah.
And so they designed the wall, what would be acceptable instead of what they knew they needed. And that's why the tsunami went.
And I won't say that doesn't happen in government contracting here, particularly where you're dealing with fixed price contracts. When you say you give us a price up front and you're supposed to cover whatever happens, when it comes to covering whatever happens, people have to cover whatever happens. And so, you know, you're a for-profit company, so you've got to do that in the most cost-efficient way you can. And that sometimes isn't the best way you can. It's sometimes the most cost-efficient way. So any government contractor that works on this is going to be subject to those same pressures and the same issues. So it's something to keep in mind as well. Anything else? Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.